Well, I suppose Junior Fitz has in many ways become part of my life. I mean, I'm doing it since 1976, so this will be my 48th tournament this year. And I dare say some people would take the view that somebody of my age shouldn't be involved in still running the tournament, but they haven't. No men in grey suits have come to suggest that I might move on as yet, and I'm quite happy doing it for the present anyway. Well, I see the job now as it has evolved. I see myself as the conductor of the orchestra rather than an individual player. There are so many people who are doing different jobs around the place, and my job is to pull it all together and to make sure that everybody is playing the right notes at the right speed and that kind of thing, and that's the best analogy I can use. I think it's vitally important to pick your people, and I'm very careful about the people I have. I have an excellent tournament committee who are very supportive. I have 10 supervisors who are all ex-players, good ex-players as a rule, who are in their early 20s and who know the setup in the tournament. And there are 10 courts, and we spread them out over the 10 courts, and every single match is supervised. And I meet with them before the tournament starts. I tell them what's expected of them. I make it clear to them that our main job is to see that the kids enjoy the tournament. That's the most important thing. And if we do our job well, they will have a good time. And if we do our job badly, they won't have a good time. So it's up to us to do our job properly. And doing our job properly means that we see that everything is done as fairly and as consistently as possible. One of the things children I have learned over the years to see like limits. Children are not as wild as some people make them out to be. Children like to know how far they can go, and I think it's fair to say that in Fitzwilliam they know that if they overstep the mark, they're going to be clipped fairly quickly. And I don't mind that being the reputation, because I think if everybody behaves themselves, then everybody will have a good time. And it's only when people start to misbehave or to step out of line that affects the whole morale of the tournament, and I don't like that. And that's why we're very watchful about those kind of things, particularly in the early stages. I couldn't possibly run the tournament now without supervisors. What they are, in effect, they're my eyes and ears around the club. I can't be in 10 places at the one time. I have to run the whole tournament. I can't give myself over to one match or two matches. So they're on each court. They each have a walkie-talkie. They're in touch with me in the office all the time. If there are any issues that arise, they can talk into me. I can deal with it or go down to where the trouble spot is if necessary. Ideally, I prefer if they can sort out the problem on the spot rather than having to chase around, because you could spend the whole day chasing from one court to the next, and that's not really what I think my job is. One innovation we've had in the last couple of years is that I have put them into the umpire chairs on each court, not as umpires. We don't have umpires until the semi-final of the singles, but they supervise, and what they essentially do is they watch the match and they intervene if they consider that somebody has made a bad call. They don't intervene over good calls, but they intervene over bad calls. And the reason I've put them into the umpire chairs is that if they're on the walkways around the place, they're too available to be approached by people who are involved with the children, such as their coaches or their parents or their friends or their clubmates. And I think perception is everything in relation to this, and I don't think it looks good if a supervisor is chatting to somebody who's connected to one of the players. So by putting them in the umpire chair, I'm taking them away from there altogether, and they are able to focus 100% on the match. We used to have every match umpired when I started to do the tournament first, but you cannot service 100 matches a day with adequate umpires. And I have discovered that a bad umpire is much worse than no umpire, because a bad umpire gets up the back of both of the players and there's nothing but dissatisfaction, and they're looking for changes, and you just cannot physically cope with that. There's no training for umpires, but the supervisors are there. They're ex-players themselves. They know what's acceptable. The code of conduct, and I sometimes wonder, have all the competitors read the code of conduct? Because as far as I'm concerned, they're deemed to have read the code of conduct. And one of the things when I meet with the supervisors at the start of the tournament is to go through each item of the code of conduct to say well, if this is done, this is a breach. If this is not done, this is not a breach, etc. If a player then turns around and says they didn't know that something was in breach of the code of conduct, I always say, well, I'm sorry, maybe it's because of my training as a lawyer that ignorance of the law is no defence. And if they're playing in the tournament, they're deemed to know what the code of conduct is about. And actually, there's nothing very elaborate about it. It's what you would expect a code of conduct to be. Do you know, really and truly, if people just come, play their tennis, get on with it and behave themselves, things like codes of conduct don't arise. I mean, they should be delighted to be playing in the Irish Championships in the premier club in the country, and should just get out there and enjoy it and not be wasting their time getting irritated or annoyed. The first issue that can arise, which is always irritating, is that there's a rule in Fitzwilliam that whites have to be worn in matches, and children, despite the fact that when they go into the website to check the time of their match, the first thing they see is whites only, and it's on the entry form, it's on the prospectus, it's on everything. But children will still roll up in every colour of the rainbow, and you have to say no. That can be an issue, and then the parents get a bit exercised about that because they don't have anything else with them. And if I tell them to go down to the shop and buy a pair of shorts down in the shop, they feel that they shouldn't have to incur this expenditure. If I can tell you a story of some years ago, an under-12 boy turned up. It was the year that Roger Federer was wearing a new gold outfit, top and shorts, and it was very smart, and he looked well in it. And this child turned up wearing the Roger Federer outfit. So he checked in, and I took his name, and I said, "Do you have whites with you?" And he said, "No." He says, "This is the new Roger Federer outfit." And I said, "I know," I said, "and it's very smart, but you can't wear it here." And his mother nearly had a fit, and she said, "But we've bought this specially for the children." I said, "I'm really sorry, but if you'd read the entry form and read the prospectus, you'd have seen that whites are not allowed." And she said, "Well, what's he to do?" And I said, "Well, I think the sponsors are giving out free t-shirts, and if you go down to the shop and buy a pair of shorts from him, he'll be fine." But it was the kind of the consternation in the reaction. But again, with things like clothing, if you let one person away with it, then somebody will say you let him away with it. And that comes back to the point I made to you earlier about consistency. If you're consistent in the way you apply, the way you regulate the tournament, then you're not going to get complaints. You must not treat people differently and not create a situation where somebody can say, "Well, you did this for somebody, why didn't you do it for me?" Other issues that can arise relate to calling, obviously. I have found, I know people might say that calling can be bad at junior tournaments. I have found over the years generally that the calling here is excellent, and that in fact the children could be criticised for making too many good calls. That you walk around sometimes and you see a ball that's way out and the player plays it, and I don't know whether or not it's that the child is afraid that they're going to be accused of being a cheat if they call a ball out. I don't see that as being a huge big problem, but there are, I think, some children who maybe are tighter in relation to calls than others, and they have to be pulled up. And I don't think that any third party, be it a coach or a parent or somebody who happens to be standing up way above looking at the match from a distance, is in any position to overrule. The supervisor will only overrule if it's a clear case, and I don't think it's any business really of any other person to intervene. Once the supervisor has made a ruling, that's the end of it. Parents often don't fully realise that the tournament is for their children, and that they really don't have a speaking part as far as the tournament is concerned. The child comes to play, and we enforce the rules. They may or may not be happy with that, but I'm not sure that their contribution really is material. I've often searched through the rules and regulations looking for the word parent, and I've never found it. So we're not trying to do down any child, and if a parent is upset because they think their child got a bad call or they didn't like the child's draw, they're entitled to take that view if they want to. But me and my supervisors and myself are trying to run the thing as fairly as we can, and I don't really feel that parents should interfere in the process. If they're not happy that we're running a fair tournament, then their child shouldn't be playing in the tournament. They shouldn't bring them in the first place. But if they enter the children and agree to the rules and regulations of the competition, I think they have to be in that spirit and take part in that spirit. I think when parents enter their children and sign the entry form and buy into the rules and regulations of the tournament, I think there's an implication there that they're trusting us to run the tournament well and to look after their children. I think pretty much their role ends there. They have no role in relation to the running of the event, the scheduling of the event, whether or not decisions that were taken were correct or not. I think if they're not comfortable with the idea that we are making those kind of decisions, then perhaps they shouldn't enter their children for the tournament. And even at the most basic level, on a busy morning when children are checking in for the tournament, you suddenly see this middle-aged person standing in front of you giving a name, and you kind of say, John Smith, are you John Smith? And they say, oh no, I'm not John Smith. And you say, well, is John Smith here? Oh yes, he's downstairs. I said, why is he not checking? Oh, I'm checking in for him. It's no place for parents. If I've one thing to say in relation to that, in relation to parents, which is let the kids go out there and enjoy themselves. That's what we're there for. We're there to try and enhance their enjoyment, and we'll do all we can to do that. And it's probably better that they don't interfere in that process.